Welcome back. Now, the most recent RMB BER Business Confidence Index showed that SA Inc. remains largely pessimistic about operating conditions in the country. And while the trade environment is further exacerbated by escalating geopolitical tensions, domestically, GNU jitters adds another layer of uncertainty. Business has stressed that it's not about who is in political power, but more about the need for stability in government, which will help shape a healthy environment for businesses to thrive in. Martin Kingston, chair of B4SA, joins us with greater perspective on this. Martin, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Now, business has been, of course, calling for cool heads amid political shifts, a possible reconfiguration of the GNU on the cards, and that, of course, weighing on sentiment. As we get started, just take me through Business for SA's reading of what's currently playing out.
Well, I think you're absolutely right in Taoleng that when we have uncertainty or unpredictability, it undermines confidence, and confidence is an absolutely essential ingredient for business, large, small, formal, informal, to make the investments and commitments that are required in the country. We, you will recall, have been working with government now for 5 years in the context of the partnership, initially, of course, with respect to the pandemic and the vaccination rollout, and for the last nearly 2 years, on key areas of focus in the economy, which are constraints to inclusive economic growth, able to contribute to the employment we need so badly. And that government that we've been dealing with initially in the sixth administration, it was obviously the ANC. On their own now, it's the Government of National Unity, has to demonstrate, not just for us, but I think for the confidence we talk about, a commitment to structural reform, a respect for the Constitution and the rule of law, and, of course, an acceptance that the private sector, in an appropriately regulated way, can play a significant role. And I think that's what has driven the confidence levels up in terms of trust towards business, and indeed, I think, a high level of commitment, both by government and business, to the partnership that is currently in place.
And I guess the global picture not making things easier. Yes, we are seeing, progress when it comes to partnerships with government and business. But, Trump coming in, imposing tariffs, and that, of course, weighing on global growth, weighing on the inflation picture, and that trickling down to, prospects for South Africa as well. How do we then position ourselves? What kind of conversations are we having at the moment with the current macro environment, geopolitical environment?
Well, you're absolutely right. The Trump administration has exacerbated, obviously, at a global level, both geopolitically and economically, the levels of uncertainty that we all face. We actually don't know, as South Africa, to what extent we're going to be able to remain within AGOA. Certainly the indications are that we may not, let alone the tariffs that were imposed by President Trump, and then indeed alleviated. We don't know who specifically that applied to yesterday. That stop-start approach, of course, just fuels uncertainty and a lack of predictability. But the tariffs that we have been aware of, let's say the motor car industry, or being unable to participate in AGOA, could certainly take at least 0.5% of GDP growth away from us at a time when we need to have 3% or above if we're going to not only sustain but actually impact upon the levels of employment that we have in the country. And 3% is an absolutely minimum target for us, which, as I said, has been constrained by some of the structural challenges in South Africa, infrastructure issues such as road and rail and port, obviously the energy issues, water has now come into focus, and it's those areas that we're working on with government to try and alleviate some of those problems. But obviously the global macro is now actually, as I said, contributing to a much higher level of uncertainty than we had beforehand.
And with that in play, is that 3% target, growth target, still achievable?
Well, it's a goal that we've set ourselves, as I said, because at anything less than 3%, unemployment actually grows in South Africa. Is it achievable in the current year? We don't believe that it is. Is it a necessary minimum for us to aim for as a country? I think we've been consistent, both as business and indeed the government, that is the absolute minimum. And by the way, we should as a country be able to achieve much more than that if we're able to address the issues that I've referred to in terms of energy availability and pricing, the same thing in terms of logistics and obviously water, the issues around local government capability and capacity. We can certainly get well in excess of 3% growth, but we're not going to do it without addressing each of those areas in a very deliberate and, if you like, a permanent way.
You talk about addressing those areas, and I guess, the structural reforms that you have mentioned, targeting electricity supply, targeting our water issues as well as our logistics issues. Martin, you say you've been working with government for about 5 years now. Would you say that the speed that we're going at is good? Are we getting everything in order in an accurate speed?
Well, I think you've put your finger on one of the key issues. The structural reforms, of course, are embedded in Operation Vulindlela. We've now seen the government launch Vulindlela 2.0. That's, if you like, a partnership between the National Treasury and the Presidency, housed within the Presidency. And we've seen real progress made, and we've identified 3 or 4 of the areas, as I've said, including crime and corruption, where we need to see real progress in addressing some of the big challenges there. We're making progress, but we are not making progress as fast as we would like. I think that people are entitled to be impatient. The reality is that we've had to put in place systems and processes. We've had to capacitate on both sides, both government and in business, to make sure we've got the right expertise to drive that forward on a relentless basis. And we shouldn't assume that there aren't naysayers in the system. There are naysayers in the system who have to be addressed in a constructive and proactive way, so that we can take this forward. One of the approaches that we've adopted has been to say, we can't cover the waterfront, we can't do everything. We've got to have a limited number of interventions in each of the areas that you've mentioned: energy, transport and logistics, crime and corruption, potentially water. And we've got to be able to monitor that, hold people accountable on both sides of the partnership. And that needs to happen at pace, recognizing that there are many other challenges. And one of them you've already talked about, the macroeconomic environment. The second being, of course, political uncertainty about the future of the government of national unity. We've said that we are not going to comment, on who participates in the government of national unity, save to say that we need to have a stable government that's able to take decisions and implement policies that are absolutely aligned with the structural reforms that we've talked about, which welcome the role of the private sector and which respect, as I said, the sanctity of the Constitution.
All right, Martin, thanks so much for your time and sharing your insights. That was Martin Kingston, Chair of B4SA.